How's it going today, everybody? Brandon to you coming again from the studio here. So I was going to give you a couple of my quick tips, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. A couple of tips that I would have for using acrylics in painting. I've been dealing with acrylics now for only almost 2 years, not quite 2 years. So it's not like I've got a ton of experience with this stuff, but I have painted with acrylics now and oils, and they both have some things I like about them, some things I don't like about them. But I tend to use acrylics a lot more for my detailed work. I like them personally for detailed work because I can put one color down or one layer down and it will dry within a matter of minutes or less. And I can turn around and put another color right on top of it without worrying about it mixing, blending, or having to put, thinner on top of heavier like I would oil paints or something. So for me, the acrylics let me do the detail work a lot easier. Oil paints I use when I need to blend something. I can create better blends with oils because they stay wet longer. I do like them good, or better I should say, for doing palette knife paintings because I can continue to move the paint around since it stays wet longer. But for all of my other brushed detailed work, I've been using acrylics. And here at the studio in the shop, when I have people coming in, I have to stop what I'm doing and go, talk to somebody or do it, something like that. The issue I had with acrylics was they would dry up on me, obviously, fast. So if I squirted some acrylic paint on a palette out of a tube, and then I had a customer come in that I would go, talk to and deal with for 20 or 30 minutes or an hour or whatever. I'd come back and my acrylic paint would be dry on my palette, which is not good. So I basically just wasted some paint. So one thing that I've been using, a tip that I got from another artist in town that actually does watercolor mostly, but she's the one that turned me on to this. I've been using essentially a piece of Tupperware. This particular one happens to be Tupperware that you would put like eggs in. It's got the little craters in it for doing eggs, but I use a piece of Tupperware with a paper towel down in there that I keep moist. I keep wet with water, so I have me a little spray bottle here, and I keep the paper towel wet and I keep the paints on it wet. And literally when I just now opened that, it's been shut since, what's today? Today is, I'm doing this video on a Wednesday. This has been shut since Monday with these paints that's been on it, and they are still very much wet and pliable and usable right here. So these paints are very much wet and usable. Yeah, your colors do kind of fade off into the paper towel there, but that's okay. I can actually use that. You can see I've been doing some mixing of some other colors in there on that. But this will keep my paints wet and usable, and they won't dry out. Literally, I can leave them in there for a week, and as long as I've moistened that paper towel and have that lid put on there, my acrylic paints will not be dry when I come back to it. So this is what lets me work on my paintings when I need to, and then something interrupts me and I have to stop. My paints don't dry out. I've got them right here in this Tupperware. They stay wet. I can come back to it. It allows me to start and stop my acrylic paints. I don't have to do anything in just one sitting or worry about that. So that's the first thing, or first tip that I would share with you that's been very handy for me. So another tip that I've got when it comes to painting objects that are essentially all the same color that you're trying to highlight on. So in this case, I'm painting snow down here and I'm painting snowmen. So the snow itself is all essentially the same color, so to speak, but now there's different shadows and shades in there. So I find it easier to put the darker tones down first, the shadows down first, and then put the lighter highlights on top of that, which is another reason why I like working with acrylics themselves, because these layers will dry pretty quickly as I'm putting them in. So in this case, I am working on these small canvas snowmen that are essentially turned into Christmas ornaments. But you can see I've got this darker color down, which is the same shadow that I've got in the background of the snow underneath. So I'm putting my darker color in first, which is going to be what all of the shadows and the darker tones that you see in the snowman or in the snow itself is going to be this color. There's this cooler blue shadow color. So I will put my dark values in first, and then work my lighter ones on top of that. And again, these layers will dry pretty quickly, which allows me to do the detail work that I want. So I'm just going to drop in the overall form of my snowman in this dark shadow tone of this blue shadow color. And then I will come back over it with a couple of passes of lighter highlight. And all I do to achieve that is bring in a little more titanium white usually into the mix when it's a snowman anyway. And each pass I can bring in more titanium white, lightening up the value each time. And I'll show you what I mean by that in here just a second. So there is my snowman form. And I'm going to start back here on the ones that are dry, and we'll move forward with the highlight process. So to highlight these snowmen here, this area here on my paper towel palette basically that I showed you is the area I've been working my shadow color that's the background of all these snowmen. And to lighten it up, all I did was bring this color here and added a little bit of titanium white to that mix. So I have lightened the value of that shadow color just enough to create a contrast, to create a difference on my canvas. So now when I come in here with this lighter value, you will see that it creates a contrast to the canvas that's here, or the color that's on the canvas. And this is just one layer that I'm going to put on here that I have lightened the value up with some titanium white, and I will start. I'm starting on the right side of these snowmen because that's where I'm going to say my light is coming from. So I'm going to start over on this side, and then as my brush loses paint, I move to the left to create the fade that I'm looking for, the gradient that I'm looking for. And then I'll do this 2 or 3 more times, lightening the value each time and starting on the right side until we have our finished product. So I'm going to quickly drop this in and then show you how we move forward with each layer. So there is essentially the first pass. Now I'm going to come back into that same mix, but I'm going to bring in even more titanium white. So we're lightening the value a second time now. Back to our same snowman here, starting on the right edge again where my light source is going to be. This is where I'm going to put my brightest highlight to start out with. And then again, now as my brush will start to lose paint, I will move away from the light source and fade that out. Which brings me to my next tip that I was going to share with you that I like to use a lot when I'm doing this kind of work is don't be afraid to do a little bit of finger painting. What I mean by that is use my fingers to create a little bit of a softer edge and a fade and a blend. So where I've got this working, I can come in here with my finger and basically smudge that out and create the kind of fade that I'm looking for, or blend that I'm looking for. So you might get a little bit of paint on your fingers, but hey, if you're painting much at all and you don't have paint somewhere on your fingers or on your clothes or whatever, then I don't know what to tell you. You're obviously not into your work enough. I'm just kidding. But anyway, you can see that I can use my fingers to help create my transition, my fade there. Let's go down here to the bottom part of the snowman and show that to you again. So I'm going to start over here on the right side, bringing in my lightest value of my color, and I'm going to work away from it to create my shape and my form here. And now I can use my finger to help fade that out. Now we do one last pass where I basically come into some pure titanium white. But now I've been working in that blue on this brush, so it's not going to be quite pure titanium white because of the color on the brush, but I'm going to touch right into that white and come right on this edge one last time. Starting on my right side where my light source is coming from, move it out just a little to create my form. And if I have any edges that I want to soften or smooth out, I can use my fingers to do that. So there we have a quick basic process of forming some highlights on some darker shadows of an object that's all essentially the same color, but you're trying to create some highlights and some shadows there. So put the darker color down first, or at least that's what I like to do. Put my highlights on top. I can keep lightening my values each pass, and then don't be afraid to use my finger to smudge that out and make a better fade. So that's my 2 tips when it comes to doing that. Alright, and my last little quick tip today in this video about acrylics is the actual paints themselves. So when I'm dealing with my acrylic paints, depending on the project I'm doing, I've got a couple of different varieties that I use. So my basic, just entry-level stuff for some smaller projects that I'm doing, some things that aren't that critical. So it's like some of these Christmas ornaments that I've been doing that you just saw, the snowman. I might be using basically an entry-level acrylic paint like this Master's Touch acrylic. You can pick this stuff up at like Hobby Lobby or Michael's. The Liquitex Basics is another one that I'll use. It's the cheaper, inexpensive acrylics. But if you're doing something that you want the paint to behave a little nicer for you, is I guess the best way I can put it, there are some options out there on acrylics. So instead of thinning stuff down with water on those, you can step up to something like these golden fluid acrylics, which are pretty much just like they sound. These are fluid acrylics. They're a lot thinner anyway, and they are a lot nicer to use when you want to do some fine detail work. You won't have to thin out your acrylic. You can go with these fluid acrylics. They're a little bit nicer. Also, Liquitex Professional Soft Body Acrylics is another one that I like. The Liquitex Soft Body Acrylics Professional Series. It's just a little smoother acrylic paint than the basic entry-level stuff. It blends a little better, it glides a little nicer across the canvas, and it's just a better paint overall. So yeah, the paint itself might cost a little bit more money, but it's pretty much the deal. I mean, you get what you pay for, right? So if the paint is a little more expensive, there's a pretty good reason for that. It's probably a little better quality. It'll probably behave a little nicer for you. So I do vary the paint that I'm using based on the projects that I've got going on. I do use the cheaper entry-level paints for stuff that's not a crucial project, and I don't want to be burning through the more expensive stuff. But you spend a little bit of money on nicer paints, it'll definitely make life easier on your more important projects, your bigger works, stuff that you want to take a little bit more time and care in. Those are my quick tips for today.